Hello and welcome to a Monday edition of the Osceola Seminole Sidelines. My name is Pat Burnham, and we are joined for the third week in a row by Eric Luallen, the voice of FSU baseball, back off a victorious road trip to Cal. Eric, welcome.
How you doing?
Pretty good, man. It's a sunny, beautiful day. One of the last spring days in Tallahassee before summer comes running through here on Saturday, and we get up to the 95, 96 degrees that we're all accustomed to. But you should have had some great weather in California last week.
Yeah, I mean the weather was good. It was funny because where we were staying in Walnut Creek, and obviously we went to San Francisco on Thursday when we practiced at Oracle Park, and we played in Berkeley. And Walnut Creek is about 21 miles to Oracle Park, and it's 12 miles to the ballpark at Berkeley. On Friday, the high in Walnut Creek was 91. The high in Berkeley was 80, and the high in San Francisco was 78.
That's crazy.
And I mean, they're that close. It's just nuts. But the way, the way with the Bay and the Pacific there, and the currents coming down, it pushes a bunch of cold water, which forms this bubble over the coastal towns. And it's so much colder when you're on the coast as opposed to even just a little bit inland. It's really pretty wild.
Yeah. What was it? What's the old song? The coldest winter I ever spent was the summer I spent in
San Francisco. Yeah.
Yeah. So you got a little bit of that. Now, that was your first trip to that part of the country. First of all, what was it like? I saw the video you shot of y'all going to Oracle Park, which is where the Giants play. Actually, funny, I was watching Verlander pitch last night or 2 nights ago at that same park. But what
stood right outside his locker, right there
really?
In his locker in the clubhouse, stood right at his locker.
Now, did y'all get a chance to visit with Buster?
No, Buster was out of the country apparently. So
okay.
He wasn't in San Francisco, wasn't even in the U.S.
Well, I figured that might have been how that whole thing took place. I wasn't sure how it got, but how the kids enjoy that part of the trip?
Oh, they loved it. It was a really neat experience for them. And you go back to 2018, we got to play in Fenway, and then this year we get to practice there at Oracle Park, and it was so funny because obviously guys are trying to, especially the left-handed hitters, they're trying to put balls into McCovey's Cove, and like guys are swinging out of their shoes. By the end of practice, and by the way, I don't want anybody to think my shirt says anything.
It says
anything. Yeah, it says Uke on it. I went like this. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Let me make sure everybody knows that my shirt is a Euchre shirt, and a friend of mine who's a big Milwaukee Brewers fan gave it to me after Bob passed away. So, but by the end of the practice, all the pitchers were up on Levi's landing, and they were basically heckling people, cheering everybody on, letting everybody know whether balls went into the drink or not. So it was a really cool experience. But you get to see these guys. Obviously every one of these guys playing at this level has that dream. They dream of playing in ballparks like that one day. And, they got a chance to walk around all starry-eyed and get a tour of the place and see how the big leaguers, see how they live. And it was a really, really cool experience for them.
Yeah. Well, it looked like they were having a lot of fun, and I'm glad you guys share that video because I don't know how many people get to, there's road trips like that can be educational fun, and I'm glad to see Link did that with him. Now, did you do anything else outside of the Oracle trip? Did you go anywhere, Haight-Ashbury, any of the famous landmarks in San Francisco?
I didn't even think about Haight-Ashbury. I wish I would have thought of that, but that wasn't even in my head. We got done with practice on Thursday, and they got back on the bus, went back to the hotel in Walnut Creek. I actually, this is pretty funny too, because when you're in San Francisco, they have Waymo taxis there, driverless taxis. And so we saw a few of them driving around. And so when we left, when we got done with practice, I didn't go back on the bus with them. I downloaded the Waymo app and wrote a driverless taxi. I'm like, hey, I'm here. I might as well do it. So that was kind of an interesting experience. And you get in and like this voice talks to you and tells you, you know, kind of the rules of riding in it. And you sit. You can choose whatever seat you want. The only thing, you can't sit in the driver's seat, but there's nobody sitting in the driver's seat, but you can't sit in the driver's seat. And they've got a touch screen. You choose the music you want, and you just sit back and ride. And it was that was quite an experience. But I took that down to Pier 39, found a restaurant, sat down, had a really, really excellent lunch down at Pier 39. And then I went and saw, they've got world famous sea lions at Pier 39. So I went and watched the sea lions for a little bit, which was funny too, because like 90% of them are sleeping, and they're on these little docks, these little floating docks. And they're a bunch of separate docks, and like 90% of them are asleep. And then there are like 10 King of the Mountain games going on, like 10 separate King of the Mountain games going on as sea lions, like one-on-one fight for position on one of these little docks. One of them gets pushed off or dives off. The other one's like, okay, cool, I won. And they go to sleep. So that was kind of a cool experience too, to see that. And then when I got done with that, I went out to hopped on a boat and went out to Alcatraz.
Okay.
And walked around Alcatraz for probably about 2.5, 3 hours.
That had to be now. How big is it compared to what you like? You know, we all see pictures of it. We've all seen both the Eastwood movie and then obviously the movie with
The Rock.
Yeah, The Rock with Sean
Nicolas
Connery.
Cage and Sean Connery and Ed Harris. It's funny because I don't think you get a feel for how tall, how high up it goes. So when you're going out there and you see it from the boat, you're like, wow, I just didn't think it was that elevated. And they said it rises about 13 stories.
See, I would not have thought that.
Yeah. And so when you get off the boat there, and they have a park ranger there, basically it's run by the U.S. Park Service. They have a park ranger there who talks to you for a little bit and kind of tells you where to go and how to experience the tour. The one I went on was not a guided tour. They have night tours that are guided. This one was during the day, so it wasn't. So you're kind of on your own to wander around and look at things. And you just, you walk up some switchbacks and you just keep rising up the island as you go and as you look. And you eventually get up to the building that housed the prison, which is at the top there. And you walk in and they hand you kind of like a Walkman, with headphones. And that's the audio guided tour. And you walk up to a sign and it says, okay, hit play now. And you hit play, and they have the narrations done by some former guards and some former prisoners from Alcatraz, and they kind of direct you where to go inside the actual cell house. And then I got done with that part and wandered around the rest of the island, and it was pretty interesting. It's like the cells are 5 foot by 9 foot, and they had in each cell, it was the prisoners had a bed or a cot. And they had 2 chairs stuck to the wall that fold down. So you fold them up when you're not sitting in them, because you can't get around the cell if they're folded down. You only fold them down when you're sitting on one, because it's 5 foot by 9 foot. And then a sink and a bathroom, or a sink and a toilet. So that's like all, one guy in each cell, 5 foot by 9 foot, and that's all they had. And then there's another wing that was for problem inmates. And that was right next to solitary confinement. And in solitary confinement, they had the cell door, and then a big heavy, a big heavy door after that. And they closed that. So the guys that were in solitary would get outside for 1 hour a week. And the rest of the time they were in their cells with the lights off.
Oh my God.
But that cell was bigger than 5 by 9.
Maybe that's where Aaron Rodgers needs to go when he makes his final decision about whether he's going to play football in 2025 or not. He likes.
I'll tell you what, too. And I walked into one of those solitary confinement cells, and like I walked in, and the first thing I did, I kind of turned around and looked, make sure nobody was behind me trying to close the door. Don't want to get stuck in there.
Listen, that's pretty brave, but I'm not sure the bravest thing you did all weekend wasn't riding that driverless car. I remember working out in Arizona. I had two jobs that used to take me out to Phoenix, Tempe a ton. I used to see them testing that technology on that stuff up and down because, Phoenix is a big grid city. There's lights every square mile going in both directions. And so it's a great place to test that technology. And I don't know if I would have been able to do it, Lou. I swear, I don't know if I'd be able to.
It was fine. I was riding through city streets in this car, and there were no issues. It was pretty cool.
Well, speaking of things that we thought were going to be on auto drive going into that weekend, we were all anticipating I think a lot of people thought FSU baseball would sweep the Cal Bears. Now, obviously, there's a lot going on. A lot of, as far as they go, it's a long trip. Most college teams do not take trips like that, at least not until this expansion of college athletics across conferences across the entire country. They got to win the first game, got shut out the second, which you don't associate Florida State with. When I saw the score, I just assumed that it was still early in the ball game and that it was, somebody had put final by a mistake because you don't see Florida State getting shut out very much. And they come and obviously win the third game to decide the series 5-1. What did you learn about the baseball Knowles over the weekend, and what was that experience? I saw some people. It seemed like a very unique stadium. It looked like they kind of had concrete seating based on some of the pictures. It looked like a pretty deep rows, and kind of looked unique, at least the stands and the buildings around the baseball field.
Well, it was built in 1933, so it's 92 years old. I'm not sure how much they've done to it since. And it seats about 2,500. The weird thing about it is it's not oriented the way most baseball stadiums are. It actually faces the southwest, which is different. Sun sets over kind of between first base and the right field corner, which isn't ideal because now, right-handed hitters are kind of looking into the sun a little bit as far as where that is. And that's one of the reasons why most baseball stadiums sit the way Hauser does, where sun sets behind third base, is to keep the sun out of the eyes of the hitters. So that was a little different. They lost 13 straight conference games, and I know everybody was hoping we'd go out there and sweep them, and we did not. They had two really good pitchers. They had one guy go 4 innings, another guy go 5 on Saturday, and those guys were very effective. And you look back and, they've got wins now against, they've only got 7 conference wins, but out of those, they've got 4 wins against teams that will probably be in the postseason. They've got to win against Duke. They've got to win against Virginia. They've got to win against Louisville, and they've got to win against Florida State. So, it's baseball. It's a weird game. And when you major leagues, they play 162 games, and the best teams win 100 to 105, and they're losing 60 some odd times a season. So it does happen. But, they came back, they bounced back. They got that win on Sunday, and you take 2 out of 3, you move on. As far as what Florida State is trying to accomplish this year, everything's still right there in front of them. And everything, there is no, right now where Florida State sits, there's no, okay, we need this to happen and this to happen and this to happen, and then we need to do this. You don't have to do all that. You just have to go out there and take care of business yourself, and you're going to be right where you need to be going into the ACC tournament and then going into the postseason.
Yeah, and I asked Bob this on Monday, just get your thoughts. I think taking the series probably, and I mean, obviously they're still the top-ranked team in the ACC, or the highest winning percentage, 667, which puts them in first place in the ACC. I'm not sure that there was any question about whether they're going to host a regional or not before they went to Cal, but it seems kind of to be a given now, right? I mean, it really doesn't matter what happens against North Carolina or the ACC tournament, I don't think. But
I think Florida State is probably hosting. Now, when you start getting into whether they're going to be one of the top 8 seeds, that I don't think you can go in and fall on your face against North Carolina and if you go in 0-3 against North Carolina, then all bets are off. But I still think Florida State's in a very, very good position. Again, you win 2 or you win 3 this weekend. I think Florida State's hosting, and I think they're one of the top 8 seeds nationally.
Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about North Carolina, because I started doing some research on them this morning, and they got some guys that can hit it a long way and hit it consistently, and they've got a couple of pitchers that don't get hit very much and strike a lot of people out. And I stopped about 5 batters short. They got 4 guys that hit over 300 or right at 300 or more. They got multiple guys with at least 3 guys with a dozen home runs or more. What are your thoughts on North Carolina coming here tomorrow, as a matter of fact?
Dangerous opponent. Hunter Stokely's one of those guys you're talking about. He leads them in batting average and in runs batted in. He's got 12 home runs on the year. He's hitting right around 340. He's a veteran guy. He's been around the league for a long time, and he's been a very good player from day one. You get some pop in that lineup with Luke Stevenson and Gavin Gallagher, who both have more than 12 home runs. So, like you said, they've got some guys. Combined. What was that?
28 combined between the two, and almost 100 RBIs combined.
Yeah. So it's a lineup that they're going to be good. They're going to be dangerous. Scott Forbes, their head coach, does a great job with that program. They can always pitch. They can always hit. They always come in and they field. They're typically a team that they're not going to go out and beat themselves. You've got to go out there and take care of things in order to beat them. You talk about fielding. I think we're at like 979 fielding percentage. I want to say North Carolina's around 975, 976. They're just overall top to bottom. I think they've got an excellent pitching staff. Jake Knapp is their number 1 guy, and he is, he's a tough guy. He's not a huge strikeout guy, but he just doesn't let a lot of people get on base. He doesn't give up a lot of hits. He doesn't walk many guys. When you look at his whip, walks and hits per inning pitched, that is below 1. And when anytime you get 1 or below, that's a tough matchup to take on, and that's what you get with Jake Knapp. So it's going to be a tough weekend. This is North Carolina's another team. They're trying to fight for one of those top 8 seeds as well. They're still in it as far as first place in the Atlantic Coast Conference.
They're 16 and 11 or 16 and 10, I believe.
Yeah, so they're in the same boat. They're coming in. They need help, but they don't need as much help as some of the other schools that are still technically, mathematically in it as far as trying to win the regular season there. So I'm sure they feel like if they come in and can take 2 out of 3, they're going to put themselves in very good position for next week in Durham and for the postseason.
Yeah, you mentioned Knapp, 10-0 in 11 starts, 193 batting average against, and then Jason DeCaro is their second most successful starter, 7-3 in 12 starts, 1.17 ERA, I believe, and 227 batting. I think maybe that's low on his ERA, but 227 batting average against. So between those 4 or 5 guys that can hit the ball and pitch it by the Carolina, it's probably going to be a fun series to watch.
Yeah, Knapp's an interesting one too, because he puts up all those numbers and he looks like an offensive lineman.
Does he really?
Yeah.
All right.
He's. They list him at 6'5", 270. So.
That's probably on the light end for.
Well, usually if you put down 270 for somebody in baseball, I'm not saying.
Yeah. Well, listen.
If you put down 270 for somebody in football, they might be 260, 265.
That is true. That is usually true. It's usually an inch shorter than they really are, and 10 to 15 pounds heavier than they really are. Yeah. So it is funny how you.
But he's just a big guy, and he's a really, really good pitcher.
Well, and is he? If he's throwing for them tomorrow?
I haven't seen their projected rotation, but I would think he is.
All right, who are we throwing tomorrow? Arnold?
Yeah, it'll be Jamie. It'll be the same order. They'll go Jamie, Joey, and then Wes.
Now, I'm assuming all 3 of these games will be televised in some capacity.
I would, yes, I think
I'll,
so.
I'll have to go back and look that up.
I don't always pay much attention to the
No, you
television.
don't. You're the radio guy. It does not impact
I'm the radio guy, and I'm not watching the game on TV. So
that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, we'll get that information to folks.
But no, actually, I think the first two, the 7 o'clock starts on the first two are because of TV. So
okay.
I think those two are on. I think the third game is ACC Network Extra, and I think the other two are ACC Network or ESPN2 or something like that.
Do we know if the Marching Chiefs are making a appearance at any time this weekend?
I don't know if they are.
Well, it's graduation time, so they may not be on campus, right? Because everybody's out.
Well, that's the tough part about that.
Yeah. Well, if they are, let's get a little pep band out there at least on Friday night. Get it rolling a little bit. That'd be great. And of course, you got softball. I think it's got their regional this week.
Yeah, they start regional play.
It's going to be a very, very busy week. And they call that the whole location called the Plex. Like they call softball the Plex, right?
Yeah, that's softball.
Does that include? So it doesn't include. That's not the whole facility. Both facilities combined. Yeah, I think we got to come up with a better name than the Plex. I don't know what we want to call it, but something.
ACC Network for the first two games, and then ACC Network Extra for the Saturday.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing this series. It should be fun to watch. Should be a great weekend for baseball. Maybe the heat will work out to Florida State's advantage a little bit because it is going to get hot, 95 degrees or so on Friday and Saturday, and that's without knowing what the humidity is going to be like. So maybe these Tar Heels will come in and melt.
It's going to be humid too.
We will see. That'll be fun. All right. Well, one other baseball item. I had a fascinating discussion with your guy Jeff Cameron yesterday about this, and several other baseball folks. Pete Rose and Shoeless Joe Jackson are now eligible for the Pro Baseball Hall of Fame. What are your thoughts on this? It's usually most people are very decisive one way or the other. Either he should never be in or he should have been let in as a player a long time ago.
Well, I'll preface this by saying I've always, and I'm a huge Cincinnati Reds fan. I grew up in Tampa. They were spring training in Tampa at that time. Their single A affiliate, the Tampa Tarpons, were there. So I grew up going to Red spring training games, going to watch them practice down at Redsland, which is now the Yankees facility down the street and on the other side of Dale Mabry from Steinbrenner Field. Yeah. Now they still have that facility where the Reds, which was called Redsland back then. So I've been a huge Reds fan my whole life. Pete Rose, Johnny Bench, I'm 7-8 years old at the time of the Big Red Machine. So that was a huge part of my becoming a sports fan. And even before the Bucks were around, because the Bucks started playing in 1976. So I was a Reds fan before the Bucks were even a franchise. But I have always felt like I don't agree with the people who just kind of who excuse away what Pete Rose did by, it's no big deal. And look at all the betting now. And yeah, well, that's fine, but that's now. That wasn't back then. The other side of that too is the argument that, well, he only bet on the Reds, which we found out was not the case, or that he never bet on the Reds, right, which we found out was not the case. Then it became, well, he only bet on the Reds to win. He never bet against the Reds. He didn't bet on the Reds every day. So I would then counter with, if he's not betting on the Reds every day, why is he not betting on the Reds to win on those days that he's not betting on the Reds at all?
Right.
And then you start getting into, and there has been an analysis done on this. And I remember reading an article years ago about some of the pitching decisions he made on days that he did not bet on the Reds.
Yes.
Where he was betting on the Reds the next day. And you start to then question, was he saving arms in this game that he didn't bet on the Reds where they lost because he wanted to have them in this game where he did bet on the Reds? So you start to kind of dig deep into that. And I think that argument kind of falls apart to try to excuse away what he did as no big deal. Now, all of that being said, I have never felt like he didn't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame is supposed to be about what he did as a player on the field And you cannot make any argument that Pete Rose as a player doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame. If we want to start getting into character and all that, there are a ton of guys in there that don't belong in there.
Yeah.
Ty Cobb was one of the biggest jerks on the planet and had plenty of off-field issues, but nobody questions whether Ty Cobb should be in the Hall of Fame because he's one of the greatest players to ever play the game. And I think, you're talking about the all-time hits leader in Pete Rose. That's a guy who needs to be in the Hall of Fame. When he was first banned from baseball, I thought that I agreed with the part about not letting him work in baseball. I did not agree with the part about not having him in the Hall of Fame. And I'm kind of in the same boat with the steroid era and all the guys that put up Hall of Fame numbers that are kept out because they either got caught or they admitted that they were doing something, when there are other guys that were probably doing the same things that are in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
They just didn't get caught or they didn't admit it, or whatever the case might be. One of the biggest cheaters in baseball was Gaylord Perry, and he celebrated for it.
Yes.
He used to go on speaking engagements and he would joke about the fact that he cheated. Spitballs were illegal. He threw a spitball. It was his main pitch. So I think there's just some very selective reasoning going on with some of these guys as to whether they should be in there or not. Look, if they were a good enough player, if they were one of the best players in their time, they should be in there. And I don't really care. Again, it's not the Hall of Character. It's the Hall of Fame. It's about the best players.
Yeah, I agree. As a player, he should be in. You can make. He was obviously.
I don't. It's not a stretch to say he was a terrible human being.
He's a very flawed person.
Yeah.
I mean, the more longer this conversation has taken place, the third or fourth person I've had it. Some of his personal proclivities are being let out of the box again. And baseball does have a character or moral.
And there's some in there that makes betting look like no big deal. Some of the stuff that he has been associated with, accused of, whatever you want to call it.
But to your point, if we're going to start having a morals clause or character clause for Hall of Fames in any sport, let's start we can clear out a lot of room, because there's it's not all made up of angels.
Right, exactly.
If you follow, it's just like you start following. The more you learn about your heroes, the more disappointed you become sometimes, because
I've always one of my criteria when I look, and again, I don't get a vote. It doesn't really matter what my criteria is, but personally, the way I kind of look at it, I always feel like if somebody can look at you and say, hey, you know what, that guy was the best player at his position when he was playing, or that guy was one of the top 5 players in the game when he was playing, or, and break it down like that. I just, you put them in there. That's what it's for. You're celebrating the way they played the game on the field. And I think, you can say the same thing. Shoeless Joe Jackson, when he played that game, look, that guy was really, really good. You go back and you look at his numbers, and it's really something. And we went to Greenville, South Carolina last year and played in a tournament the first weekend in March. And the whole ballpark there in Greenville is kind of built around Shoeless Joe Jackson and his career. They've got Shoeless Joe Jackson's house right there. It's now a museum. The street the ballpark's on is the name of it's based off of his career batting average. So all of it is about Shoeless Joe. And, I think he's another guy, when you look at the numbers, look at what kind of player he was, I don't think you can keep him out of there. And he took money in the World Series, but he obviously didn't play like he was taking money in the World Series.
No, he had a great series, from what I recall. Actually, one of my favorite baseball movies of all time is 8 Men Out, which is the story about the 1919 White Sox.
There's a guy on Twitter, and 8 Men Out was based on a book. I've read the book probably 3 times in my life. Some of the stuff historically is wrong in the book, and then the movie, they take the book and then they dramatize some things, and they never stick solely to the source material when they take a book and make it into a movie.
Yeah.
But there's a guy, his handle on Twitter is at Buck Weaver, and Buck Weaver was the third baseman for the Chicago Black Sox, and he was one that did not take any money and was banned from baseball, and he fought until his death to get reinstated. But the handle Buck Weaver on Twitter, that guy is actually a historian who has studied this whole thing, and some of the stuff he posts, and he'll post links to websites, and you get to read all of the real stuff, the stuff that maybe they didn't know when 8 Men Out was written, or the stuff that they got wrong in 8 Men Out. And he posts some fascinating stuff. And I can take some of those links that he posts, and I can get lost for hours and hours just reading some of what he puts out there.
I believe that was one of John Cusack's first prominent roles as Buck Weaver in 8 Men Out. So
it was a great cast.
It was a great cast.
Yeah, you had,
I think Charlie Sheen was in that.
D.B. Sweeney was Shoeless Joe. Charlie Sheen was Happy Felsh, and
Fraser Crane's dad was John.
Yeah, he was the manager.
He was manager. He's a great manager.
Lefty Williams was. I can't think of his name right now, but I can't think of his name right now. Yeah. But it really is. I love the movie, and I've probably watched that movie 50 times.
Every time
like I said, I've read the book 3
a little
times.
bit of it. Yeah,
but if you ever check that guy out on Twitter, he's got some great stuff on there.
I wrote it down. I'm ready to add him to the Twitter feed as we speak. All right, well, Lou, we appreciate you joining us. I know we kept you longer than we thought, but appreciate the insight on the baseball team, and of course the stories are. I mean, I enjoy the stories more. I enjoy the baseball talk, but just glad you had a good time in San Francisco, Berkeley, and we'll see you next week. Talk a little bit about the ACC tournament after the Tar Heels come to town.
I'll be coming to you from Durham. We'll already be there by Wednesday. So
all right. Well, hey, have a fun trip, and we'll talk to you next Wednesday. And we're fixing to bring Nick in to talk a little recruiting. Thanks, Lou.
Sounds good, man.
Nick,
how's it going, Pat?
Well,
how are you?
I'm doing good, man. Just talking a little baseball, little 80s movies, all that kind of fun stuff that old guys like to talk about.
Maybe it's just because I'm used to listening to Lou talk on the radio, but I could sit here and listen to Lou talk about baseball for hours. I don't know if it's just like a brainwash isn't the right way to put it, but you do something so long and then you just kind of enjoy sitting backstage listening to Lou talk some baseball. So that was good. That was good stuff.
Yeah, his stories from Berkeley are pretty cool too. I don't know if you heard him talk about the Seals fighting on the rocks and fighting for a position to sleep, and he went to Alcatraz, so that was pretty good. All right, so we bring in Nick in. Nick has been busy putting together our recruiting boards on offense, particularly for the last couple of days. I know Friday, Nick, you came up with the revised running back board, and I am trying to find it. Why cannot not find it in the board thread? But tell us what we need to know. I got it now. Tell us what we need to know. Obviously, Florida State has Amari Thomas committed from Mariana, who's now not at Mariana. He's somewhere else. So he is transferred.
He's at Bluntstown now,
that's right, Bluntstown.
I found to be a fascinating move, but he had a reason for that, and I can't remember off the top of my head why he decided to move.
I think family moved there. I believe that's what it was. I could be wrong. But I believe it had something to do with family.
Well, he moved closer to campus either way. So, yeah.
So what's going on with the running backs? I know you've got several, I think the debate now is, how with Amari already committed, Nick, you've just brought in the kid from Oklahoma, Gavin Sawchuk, who's got 2 years to play and looks to be the guy they're going to go to, he'll be given a chance to win the job. I don't think there's any doubt about that based off his past and what Mike has said about him. So who are we looking at outside of Amari Thomas at the high school level that you think Florida State would have an interest in legitimately bringing in here as a second running back in this class, which may or may not be a priority given Sawchuk, but obviously if they're successful running the ball, which people are hoping they're going to be under Gus Malzahn, I don't think it's out of the question that you could see two high-profile running backs signed in the same class.
Yeah, and they certainly are still in on some high-profile guys. I after we talked about it last week, thought about it a little bit more, I think they do pursue a second running back in this class, and I think they do. I don't know that they'd make that the highest priority. I think after the spring, I think wide receiver and bringing in a good wide receiver class is probably a higher priority. That and tight end, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But I do think that they go for a second running back in this class, and they're still in on some good ones. I think Carson Baker is probably, I don't want to say the most attainable right now because I don't think Florida State leads for him right now, but I do know that Florida State likes him a lot, particularly David Johnson, which is obviously the running backs coach. He likes Baker. He likes the speed and the home run hitting potential that he has, obviously being a track athlete. And that speed is something that I think, just as a larger theme, is something that fits this offense well, and what it's going to look like. They are in on some other like high quality running backs like Derek Cooper. That one, I believe that he is going to go to an SEC school all the way, but it's good that they're going to get him back on an official visit, and they are in on some other guys like Jay Lamar. And I think that one is one to watch as well. He didn't have the most, let's say, the most quality spring visit because he came and was here for only a couple hours during Legacy Weekend, but the kid was so exhausted. He had just come from Ohio State, and to say that he had bags under his eyes would have been an understatement. So they're in it with some good running backs down the stretch, and they're going to get all these guys on official visits. And I do think that they're going to try to bring in a second running back.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. If they can get to, you might as well take them. I just wonder between a lot of different things going on if they will actually be able to do that. As you said, maybe prioritize some other positions. And as we both know, when you prioritize a position, now we have the NIL to deal with, and how are you going to allocate your money to what position? So
some people like to spend it all on offensive tackles, which that's been a hot topic recently.
Listen, they're spending those guys. I don't know who you're referring to. You're referring to Miami, and those guys are spending it everywhere. It does not matter.
No, it's not. It's everywhere for them for sure.
Yeah, they're definitely getting after it in the NIL world, and
that's an impressive win for Miami because up until Sunday night, I thought that it was going to be Georgia for sure, and Miami comes in last minute and swoops up and gets the number one prospect in the country via Rivals. I'm not sure if he's number one on other recruiting services, but. When's the last time Miami had a number one prospect committed to them? I'm sure you probably don't know off the top of your head, but that's more of like a it's more of
I worry more about how they play once they arrive on campus as opposed to how they played in high school. So I'm sure listen, number one prospect in the nation is hard to get. You got a 1 out of 132 chance at best. But listen, I read the kid's comments. He's kind of gotten offended that the way people are interpreting this. And, he basically said that all things were equal. Obviously, finances were a part of it, but it's hard to believe that Georgia's not competing with Miami financially. So I think it was a little bit of everything. My money is certainly a part of it, but I think Miami's been in this all along. I think they were just, and it seems like Miami pretty much. We know in the spring portal, if a guy went to Miami that had shown interest in Florida State, he did not end up at Florida State. Listen, Miami is spending money, and we're going to find out if it pays off because it seems like every kid that Miami and Florida State both contacted or both had visits from. I think there were not a whole lot that had multiple. Guys had visits to either or both. Listen, Miami's, they're spending money. There's no doubt about that. And I know they made a run at one of Florida State's players post spring, and they were not going to have any problem matching what Florida State was reportedly or is reportedly playing this particular player. But listen, it's crazy. Some of these numbers I am hearing, I believe the last number I heard on Cantwell was $2 million over the course of his career at Miami. And of course, that's probably negotiable. Who knows whether that's a 2-year contract, 3-year contract, 4-year contract? But I'd heard $2 million was the number. I don't know if that's true or not. Listen, a lot of people say a lot of different things when it comes to recruiting, and but yeah, listen. We'll see what happens with all that. They got to win. They're spending the money. Mario better get it done.
No, it's. I mean, you could just beat the drum for every single prospect that commits anywhere. There is 6 months until signing day. There are a lot of things that can happen.
Well, and
in
of
6 months.
Yeah, and of all the things that have changed about recruiting, is what Jerry and I were talking about on Monday. The one thing that has not changed is you still don't sign until December, and nothing's official until you sign the DocuSign or put pen to ink or ink to paper, or whatever the case may be. All right,
you win the first recruitment, and then you got to win the second recruitment. We could go on and on for all of these analogies.
I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm not overly concerned about the quarterback position at Florida State because for 2026. Because if they do well in the field, they're going to find themselves back in the ball game with people for players. Maybe it's a Landon Duckworth, maybe it's a Bowie Bentley, maybe it's someone we don't know about, but or haven't really started talking about yet. But I do think that there's I think that's the one reason I do not listen. Winning on the field can change a lot of things narrative-wise in a recruiting process for any individual player. So we'll see what happens there. All right, so you got a long story that I think you put out last night on the wide receiver and tight ends board. Obviously, at tight end or wide receiver, basically 2 commitments, although Darion Williams, everybody knows he's going to be a receiver in high school, Tampa Plant High School, been verbally committed since April of 2024. So he's been in FSU's plans for over a year. And then Ephraim White, who is an athlete at Vero Beach, you have him penciled in at receiver. He is also a player that could ultimately end up in the defensive backfield. Those are 2 commits. So who are the next guys? If you had to name 5 guys, who are the next 5 guys on FSU's wide receiver board out of the high school ranks, and how many do you think you see them taking? Normally it's 4 or 5. Where do you think Florida State's trying to get to with the receivers in 2026?
I'd probably say 4. I think 4 is a comfortable number. I think that they probably will go shopping in the portal for a lot of positions in this upcoming fall, but I think wide receiver is going to be one of those again. In terms of high school, Brandon Bennett is a guy that I think you look at his recruitment and you see the relationships that he has not only with his former head coach in Patrick Surtain, but also he did have a prior relationship with Tim Harris Jr. well before he became the wide receivers coach at Florida State. So there's a lot of relationships working in that recruitment that makes me feel good about where the Seminoles are. They're going to have to contend with Georgia and Florida in terms of his official visits. So obviously it's not going to be an easy pull, but when you have the established relationships like that, it makes you feel really positive about where that one was heading or is heading. In terms of prospects that Florida State was able to catch up with, I mean, this time last year, Devin Carter, who was obviously an FSU legacy, wasn't even remotely considering Florida State. Or at least further down the line last year, it became more evident that he wasn't seriously considering FSU, not only due to maybe some of the coaching that was still on the staff there, but also just how the wide receivers performed. So Florida State got back-to-back visits from him this spring, and now Florida State is the only other program apart from Auburn who's committed to right now that has an official visit. So they've been able to, I would almost say the word miraculously, work their way back into this one. So that's one to monitor as well. Somebody that I know that Florida State is really, really high on is Jason Lopez, who goes to Chaminade Madonna down in South Beach. And I talked to Fish, and he told me the same thing that I had been hearing already, which is that there is some significant interest between the two sides. And Florida State's going to have to battle Miami for him, which obviously is no small task. But Jason Lopez, despite not being on campus since his freshman year, and he was going to get on campus at the end of April for that final spring practice. And obviously we all know what happened as to why that visit didn't go down. despite not being able to get on campus and get FaceTime with these coaches, he's seriously considering Florida State. And that's one that's going to be good to monitor moving forward. How many are we at, 3 or 4? I've been talking for a minute here, but I guess out of those 3 or 4, those are guys that I think are probably at the top of the board right now. They've got a couple down the list that have been on campus before that have scheduled official visits, including a pair of teammates out of St. John Bosco in California that obviously are tremendous prospects, but you can't feel tremendously good about Florida State's chances with them both being committed to other schools and also living, 1,000 miles away or so.
Oh,
so
Madden Williams and Daniel Odom from John Bosco in California.
So I think next to tight ends, which we'll talk about in a second, I think Florida State's wide receiver board compared to where it was in January has shaped up quite nicely from where it was, because you and I were out there for the junior days and kind of gauging the wide receivers, and there wasn't really anybody that we felt Florida State had tremendous amount of momentum with. And now that we've seen these spring visits unfold, there's kind of a brighter picture now that Florida State has been able to work guys in, get them on some visits, and get back into some recruitments.
Yeah, listen, the Devin Carter thing is going to be interesting. I think that will continue to be a fluid recruitment. It's proved to be that way since he's been started being recruited by a lot of different colleges. I think he's kind of a wild card. It wouldn't be surprised me if there are other programs become involved with him as the season goes on. And I think that there will be. I think he'll end up taking 4 or 5 official visits. That's just my read on the situation. If you told me if you're going to take one slot, you had Devin or Jason, I would go with Jason. And listen, I think it's important to notate that, yes, he was supposed to come in on a visit in April, and the track shooting at Florida State's campus canceled that visit and any all campus activity that weekend. And I think it's important for people to know that the reason he could not come earlier than that is because he's a 2-sport athlete. He's a very, very good basketball player. So he's been busy. As soon as football over, he transitioned into basketball. And I don't know this.
And Florida State has offered him in basketball as well. So it's going to be interesting to see whether or not that plays a factor into his recruitment. That's something that I'm going to get with him hopefully in the next couple of days, reach out to him and see kind of where he is and whether or not that's a factor for him in terms of his recruitment, whether or not he wants to continue to play basketball at the next level. Because Florida State does have a couple of multi-sport athletes right now in the program. And we'll see if the big dog wins out in the end in terms of time management. But at least for right now, Florida State seems open to have multi-sport athletes on the roster. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not he continues to, or he wants to continue to play basketball in college. I think that'll be a factor.
Yeah, basketball in college is a lot different than basketball in high school. There's no doubt about that. I remember BJ Daniels, who was a great basketball player at Tallahassee Lincoln, ended up signing at USF as a quarterback. He went to one basketball practice in college. He decided I'm going to stick with football, and he was like Big Ben Player of the Year in basketball, averaged 30 points a game. It does change. All right, so let's move to tight ends, and listen, this is a position of need for Florida State. This room is not in great shape as it currently sits. You got a lot of one-dimensional guys in that room. You either got guys that can catch, guys that can block, or one guy potentially that can do both, and that's Landon Thomas. I think their other guys are who they are, at least right now. Now, we don't know what Chase Lofton's going to turn into eventually, but he is a wide receiver. He's a pass-catching tight end right now, as is Randy Pittman. Marqueson Douglas is on the other side of that thing. He's block first, catch second. And, of course, Landon Thomas is big enough that he could turn into a fully capable tight end, capable of both catching and blocking. So what do you got for us? I know Isaac Jensen, the tight end from Chase Lofton's high school, is locked in an official visit. Who else we need to be paying attention to at tight end?
Yeah, there are a number of tight ends from the Midwest that Chris Thompson has been able to lock in official visits, with Isaac Jensen being one of them, obviously the teammate of Chase Lofton. So there was a prior relationship there. A couple of guys that made the trip to come see a practice this spring, Evan Jacobson out of Waukee, Iowa, who is also relatively close, I believe, to Nebraska. So that same type of area. Those guys have locked in official visits. And then you have a guy in Kai Wesley out of Orem, Utah, who's a multi-sport athlete. I mean, 6'7", 240 pounds. If you want to talk about a guy whose body is unlike anybody else on the board, I mean, that's him. He was going to try and make it to a spring practice. Obviously that never transpired, but it's not for a lack of want. It really was just travel complications. And you got some other guys on the board, but a lot of kind of that 6'6", 220 poundish pass catching tight end type bodies. Other than that, Heze Kent, who Florida State is back in his recruitment, 6'5", 260 pounds. At least that's how it appears on his Rivals profile now. That's going to be one to monitor, but Florida State's going to have to battle a lot of local programs, as Heze Kent is probably one of the more, I would say, established local prospects in terms of like the Florida, Georgia area. And then Julius Miles, who just got off a official visit to Colorado. He's been a frequent visitor to Florida State for a while. They're in a decent spot in his recruitment right now, but he's kind of one of those. Some recruiting services consider him a tight end, some a wide receiver. He's kind of in that same mold as some of the kids that they took this past fall, kind of like a Tayshawn Gelsey, where you can go either way. He's either a very lengthy receiver or a pass catching tight end. So some of that same body type. But there's a wide variety that Florida State is pulling from, and you take a look at the board and where it sits and how much of a need it is. You got to feel good about how many prospects that Florida State is going to be getting on campus for an official visit for the tight end room.
Yeah, I think they want Heze Kent and one or two of the other guys. I think that they definitely want Heze Kent because he does give you a big athlete that has the ability to block. He's 6'5", 260, and that's probably small. He is physically imposing. I think he's number one or number two on their board. Then I do think that they would take an Isaac Jensen, who's 6'6", 220, a Julius Miles, who's 6'6", 222. Landon Myree is going to be a kid that's going to be a little bit more like a traditional tight end at 6'4", 225. You would think he's a guy that could come in and play at 6'4", 250. I think he's got an official visit scheduled already for Florida State, so we'll see what happens there. And then DJ Howerton, we'll see. I think he's coming in on an official visit, but we'll see if they can get him out of North Carolina. NC State's involved in that one. Kai Wesley, that's a long way. We've seen him pull tight ends before. But again, he's a bigger guy, 6'4", 240. So he's a guy that you could obviously see being both a pass catcher, receiving tight end, and a blocking tight end. So I think they'll take two at the very least. I think Corbin Fordham's gone. I think that ship has passed. He's Todd
yeah, I agree.
Son, and he's committed to Ohio State, and I think that's where he'll end up unless there were to be a coaching change of some sort at Ohio State. So, listen, they'll continue to take a run at him for sure, and they should. And should try to leverage the fact that his father was a player at Florida State. And but listen, they got a boy at NC State that Florida State didn't recruit, and they got one at Louisiana Lafayette that Florida State didn't recruit. So we'll see what happens with Corbin, but he's probably the highest rated tight end, 42 nationally. Over all the other tight ends that they're actually. DJ Howerton is no, he's not. He's 32 in his state, not 32 nationally. But yeah, so the thing I do like about what they've done with the tight end board is it seems a little bit deeper than the wide receiver board at this point. And I do think they'll take 2 to 3. I think they need to take 2 to 3. But I do think, particularly with Gus's offense, which listen, it's going to be a lot closer to 50-50 run pass than people envision. It's going to be run heavy for sure. It's going to be power run heavy, but I think they'll still be within 50 54% of the time, 45% of the time, they're just going to throw the ball, I would think. So it'll be skewed towards the run, but I do think they've got to get some bigger bodies in there at tight end, guys that can be effective as blockers and as pass catchers. So
yeah, the wide receiver board is in a much better position than it was in January, but I still think it does need a little bit of work, especially because I know that I have it classified as 2 commitments at wide receiver, but I'm concerned about Darian Williams flipping to Florida. I think that's a real possibility. I think he needs to see this offense be successful. Obviously, there's other teams involved with Darian. It's not just Florida, but to kind of mum on where your commitment stands when you're at spring practice, and then to later say that Florida and Florida State are neck and neck while you've been recruited or where you've been committed rather for over a year. I think that Florida State is going to have to battle to keep him. And if that's the case, you're down to Ephraim White, who could be a receiver. I mean, he used to play quarterback, and they took him super early. And you could find yourself where you're down to 1 commitment that maybe you don't feel so great about. And sure, a lot of the other guys on the board you've made up some ground with. But I think that wide receiver board could and should get deeper if they miss on some of their targets in the summer.
Yeah, listen, if they win some ball games, that's going to make it harder for Darian to come off his commitment. I think that's, they went on him early. Of course, these kids are going to, listen, they're going to continue to leverage their position with the schools they're committed to, and they're going to be advised to do that, take other visits. As long as this thing is a wild west and there's no salary cap and you can't say, hey, on average, this is what a kid's going to make as a freshman. This kind of stuff's going to go on. But yeah, I think obviously, it's never over until it's over. But I do think a kid like Darian and Florida State could somehow rip off 8 wins in 2025. You help your cause with a kid who may be considering other schools. And one of the reasons legitimately that he is considering other schools is what Florida State did on the field last year, right? I mean, that's so we'll see what happens there. Any other updates we need on the recruiting front, Nick?
Yeah, Florida State is continuing to to get some offensive tackles on official visits. God, you talk about the wide receiver and tight end story being a long one. I might be writing the offensive line board for 3 weeks. At this rate, they've got so many guys coming in on campus. So 4-star Kamari Blair has set an official visit. The Hurd twins, Cortland and Courtney, have set official visits earlier this week. And this morning I talked to Tyler Chuckium. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He's kind of a guy that's getting a lot of attention out of the spring camp circuit, and he could potentially blow up. He's set an official visit for June 20th. So Herb Hand is continuing to stack the cupboard in terms of tackles that they're bringing in on campus. So that and a couple of other tidbits coinciding with the wide receivers are still on our board. So you should definitely go to the boards and check them out if you're a subscriber. And I'll be going to Atlanta this weekend for the Rivals camp in Atlanta. So make sure that you guys stay on the boards. We'll have some Knicks nuggets, I'm sure, and some updates from the Rivals camp in Atlanta. So that's going to be interesting. I haven't been to Atlanta too many times, but I'm excited to go. And I'm excited to see like if it's a different feel. Like South Florida and Florida prospects have a certain feel about them, and their skill sets. I'm interested to see who shows up in Atlanta. And hopefully this one doesn't get rained out, because that sucked. That sucked in Miami.
We'll see. We're tougher in Atlanta. Last year we camped through the rain. We don't worry about. I mean, you would think people in Miami would be tougher than that when it comes to.
Yeah, I thought so too. But the lightning was pretty bad. I don't know if there was
cold in Atlanta, and us country boys just kind of battled on through, and we made it. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're getting to go. That's good. I'll be at St. George Island while you're working at camp. So.
Lucky you.
Enjoy. I will not be worried about recruiting.
St. George, how close is that? How close is that to Atlanta? Maybe I just come by and Bring you
I
a
will
couple
say,
of audio files.
if you have not, I know you're probably going Marriott for your stay with the Marriott Hotel. I'll get you, if you haven't already got your hotel room, you need to stay at the Marriott that oversees one of the runways at Atlanta International Airport. It is cool to watch those airplanes take off and land at night. And you can sit right around your balcony with a cold glass of tea and watch them land. And that's where I stayed the last 2 years when I worked the Atlanta camp, and
I would have to wager that I'm probably staying there. Jerry has booked my hotel graciously, but I don't know. He hasn't sent me the information, so I'm unsure of exactly where that is. But hey, maybe I'll be surprised and I'll get to. I'm not a tea guy. I'll drink a couple cups of coffee, but
they do have a nice hotel bar there at that airport. So if you need the name, Jerry can probably cancel without penalty right now to get you to the airport, hotel. All right, Nick, we're going to let Bob in. I think Bob's on the side of the road on I-10 somewhere. So we're going to bring Bob in and talk ACC meetings. All right, Nick, we'll see you later.
All right. Thanks, Pat.
Bob.
Pat, how are you?
I'm doing well. Where did y'all pull over on the side of the road, and what county are you in the state of Florida?
With the best of intentions, we were going to visit the Busy Bee for a pit stop, but we made it a little bit closer since you guys were talking, and we're in Monticello, so we're almost home.
Oh, y'all are. All right. So y'all come down 90. Are y'all on 90?
We're on I-10. We're on I-10.
All right.
Yeah.
I think I recognize that BP sign behind you. All right. So you guys have spent the last couple of days lounging on the beach at Amelia Island and enjoying the company credit card. What's going on? What do we need to know? I know Mike Alford spoke. I know Mike Norvell, Luke Laux. Everyone had, as my buddy said, everybody's got something to say these days. We're in talking season because there's nothing going on besides baseball and softball. And we talked a lot about them earlier today. But what did you guys learn in Amelia Island, and what were some of the key points that that interested you?
I think the big football talking point, and again, I will caution, no true news came out. Like you say, it's talking season, it's proposal season as coaches and administrators sit down and discuss things. I thought the most interesting proposal is along the lines of the transfer portal, going from 2 windows to 1. I would say there is unanimous understanding there needs to be 1 window. The question is when. And I've heard, I think Mike Norvell and the coaches are in favor of January. Of course, That makes sense for player development, off-season conditioning, spring practice, etc. Some people do want April. There's a Ross Dellinger report that we may see OTA-style practices in May and June. There's a lot on the table in proposal season. So I think this is an interesting talking point. Again, no decisions, but read the tea leaves, right? Every college sport has 1 portal window. Football has 2. There are problems with 2 portal windows, i.e. Jordan Scott and briefly Marquise Douglas. I think coaches want this. It's a question of when and the eventuality of when this goes into implementation.
Yeah, and the hard thing is, as we all know, is how do you work it into the academic calendar, right? Because if you move it to January, anybody that you take in the portal can't come into school until summer. So it makes sense to me. And this is a conversation for another time, but I'm not sure that the presidents of these universities are ever going to say, "Hey, let's revise the academic calendar so that these 60 schools that major in football can recruit and have free agency," right? Me and my brother were talking about this the other day, and he thinks I'm dead wrong. Do you ever go to where every school decides it's going to have a Jan term where if kids want to come back to school in January, they can come take 6 to 9 hours in January, and then the real spring semester starts in February? Now, when I went to Sanford, we had a Jan term. You didn't go back and Sanford was not a football school. It was a school that produced preachers and pharmacists. So But so we had a Jan term. So if you were not a Jan term student, you didn't come back for the second semester until February, which went until almost the end of April. I think we got out right around May 1st. I think that's something they ought to consider, but they won't. But this is a $1 billion industry sport that calendars are being dictated by academics. I'm sure there was no talk of a revised academic calendar, but that would be one solution. But January, and I agree that's when it should be, because almost everyone outside the top 4 to 8 teams is done with their season. But the offshoot of that is they don't get to come into your program until May.
Yeah, I'm with you, Pat. I don't see presidents and chancellors moving the calendar around. I think there's a lot of other pressing issues, whether it's just running a college campus or running college athletics. So what we see when we see it, big question marks. But when you hear unanimous thoughts, you know what you're heading toward. You're driving toward a solution.
Was there any talk among the ADs or head coaches about any kind of salary cap, NIL wise, or revenue sharing wise? It seems like schools are still. Well, we know schools are still all over the place. I mean, if you believe what you hear, Texas is going to spend $40 million on their football roster for this particular year. I would assume that Florida State's budget for NIL is probably half of that, if not more. I've heard $15 to $18 million. I don't know if that's true or not. I know one guy's salary on that football team, and that's a sourced information. And but yeah, so but was there any talk of that? Any talk of NIL reform or legislation while you guys were there?
Yeah, of course. The big what will shape college athletics in the short term and the long term is the House NCAA case that Judge Wilkin is still, contemplating on how to take action. But that will shape revenue sharing, what it looks like. Everybody is preparing as if on July 1, they will have to be ready to go. And again, to make this kind of shape-shifting move in roughly 6 weeks is a really big ask for everyone in college athletics. Talked to somebody over there in Amelia Island. There's a feeling that Judge Wilkin will come with some type of ruling early next week. So potentially we are finally under 7 days. I think Michael Alford has said what you can say, just that he's got a plan, he's got a contingency and another contingency. You just have to try and plan. A salary cap, I would love it. I would love buyouts to be enforced. I'd love a lot of things. I'd love for all types of things to be enforced. I don't see or hear anything about a cap at this point. As far as these early discussions, I think they're trying to get to step one, being what does true revenue sharing look like with Judge Wilkin's ruling? What do roster limits look like? Do you grandfather in as far as roster limits? So I think they're in those type of details currently.
All right. I know Luke was there. Luke Laps was. What was the update from the basketball program?
Luke is a first-time head coach, unfiltered. And I've said that to a lot of people. If you want to go watch the video, check it out on the Osceola's YouTube channel. It's 8 minutes, give or take. But yeah, he talked a lot about losing one assistant coach, a Tennessee native, went to go coach on Rick Barnes' staff at the Volunteers. That's why there was a vacancy. Pretty understandable, especially with a nice salary raise that he got going up to Tennessee. He's going to add 2 more players, likely both international players. And then scheduling is what he's pretty deep into right now with assistant coach Michael Fly. You folks will like this if you didn't read the story. Luke Laux is trying to schedule all 4 Final Four teams from just, a month plus ago. So you've got Duke on the schedule already. You got Florida on the schedule already. That would be adding Houston and Auburn in theory. And Luke has said, I understand, people are telling me I can't just schedule big boy after big boy. You've got to put in a few here and there. But these are the dynamics of building a schedule. It's about I call it the RPI still. It's the net. It's about those ratings, and you can't just schedule smaller schools and stack lesser quality wins. It's about battling some of the who you think is going to be a potential big boy in the 2025-26 season. So scheduling is pretty deep. I won't say that we're close to a schedule because usually that's going to come out non-conference wise in August. So don't expect anything soon. I want people to kind of get a shape for Luke's scheduling is going to be very different. Whereas Coach Hamilton's was very soft, Luke's is potentially going to be very, very challenging.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's going to be fun to see. I mean, I'm glad he's unfiltered. He will probably be less forthcoming as the more experience he get. He might turn into more Belichick, New England Belichick, not North Carolina Belichick. So we'll see what happens there. Now, I know Mike spoke a little bit. I read some of his stuff. It seemed like more really post-spring type stuff. Anything in particular that Mike said that stood out to you guys?
Yeah, and again, we've probably talked to Mike Norvell. This is maybe the third time in the last 2 weeks, so we're not hitting on new ground, especially with that House NCAA settlement not being in place just yet. Some of the big picture things, I asked him about edge and leadership. Coach Norvell's talked about edge for almost 4 months since Orlando, not seeing it in 2024. And I asked him directly, did he see it in spring practice? And again, remember, there were clearly days where he was unhappy with the focus, the edge, etc. I think he said broadly speaking, very, very happy with the edge. He understands that was a missing piece. It correlates to physicality. It correlates to leadership and accountability. So I think I wrote this line in the story. These are intangibles that maybe don't show up specifically on the scoreboard, but they lead themselves to losses. If you don't have leadership and accountability, and yes, physicality, it can lead toward losses. So again, like you said, talking season, we're in talking season. I think that's been a big talking point for Coach Norvell.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, I hope he's right. They need an edge. They need, we heard a lot about physicality and heard him talk a lot about that during spring. And certainly we know the one of the final padded practices they had was going to be a goal line scrimmage, which is nothing but really physicality. So listen, we'll find out. We've got plenty of time to talk about it, and we'll find out about it on August 30th when Bama comes to town. I'm working my way through the Bama roster right now to do a spring or a summer scouting report. And listen, those guys have lost a lot. They've added a lot. It's going to be interesting to see. They've got a new quarterback, and they lost two of their best offensive linemen. So we'll see what's going to – I can't wait to finish that little research, see who Florida State's going to be facing on August 30th. But yeah, well, I figured he would probably it would probably be more post-spring stuff. I know he talked a little bit about Sawchuck and his addition to the running back room. But, well, I know you guys want to get home, so Bob will let you get back in the car. If Jerry may have wandered off and is doing something right now. I don't know. Is he anywhere near you, or is he in Bucky's shopping right now?
He is on the other side of the truck. We are ready to get back on the road and get back to Tallahassee. Yeah.
All right. Well, we thank y'all for pulling over and letting us know what happened in Amelia Island. And I will probably see one or both of you guys on Friday at 3 p.m. for our next show. So, Rob, y'all get back in the car, buckle your seatbelts, and get back home safe.
Absolutely. We'll see you Friday, 3 o'clock.
All right. Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it. All right, if you're not an Osceola subscriber, please go to theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com and check us out. We've got all of Bob and Jerry's reporting from the ACC meetings. Nick's got his tight end board and wide receiver board article up. I believe Kurt was at the base golf regionals, which Florida State won handily, and Luke Clanton became the first multiple regional individual winner. That's a mouthful at Florida State today, as they won on their home course, but Kurt will have a report from there as well. So you can go to theosceola.com for that. If you're not a subscriber to the Osceola YouTube channel, please hit the subscribe button before you log off today, and also hit the notification button so that you can get updates on when we're doing shows live or taped. Our regular schedule is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, live at 3 o'clock. But if something breaks, sometimes we do shorts, and we'll post those on YouTube. So sign up for the notifications, sign up for the channel, and we will see you on Friday at 3. Everybody have a great day.